Hey, I love therapy, and in fact, I've been going to therapy since I was around 6 years old. Though I talk about therapy a lot and may interview some therapists on the show on occasion, nothing that is said in this podcast should be considered a replacement for therapy. If you are struggling, I urge you to please seek guidance from a therapist because you are absolutely worth it.
Hello, everyone. You are listening to Wine, Dine, and 69, a podcast about dating, relationships, sex, and self-love. I am your host, Rachel Dalton. I hope everybody is doing well. We're off to a great start here. You know what? I'm not even going to edit it out. I'm just going to leave it. I hope everybody is hanging in there. I have to apologize that this episode is coming out late because I was editing said episode and then an earthquake happened on the East Coast and I got distracted. And there's an eclipse happening in a few hours. So that kind of gives you the idea of the state of the world. This intro to this episode is kind of a time capsule of the insanity that has kind of been happening right now. And, normally I would, in this intro, talk a little bit about what's been going on with me, what I've been up to, et cetera, et cetera. But to be quite honest with you, it's a fucking lot. And I don't even have the emotional energy to do that. So what I'll say is that I've been having the toughest time that I have had in a very, very long time. Nothing has actually happened in like my current situation. Nothing external has happened, but I've had some aha moments when it's come to past traumas and some really important realizations looking backwards. And I've been going through it, basically, is what it is. I will talk about it at length in a future intro, but I just can't right now. I am exhausted. Luckily, I do have really incredible people around me, really good friends, my family, and a fantastic partner who have been incredible through this. I was going to try to make like an eclipse joke or the shakeup, an earthquake joke. They've been with me through this shakeup in my life. Whatever. Okay, moving on. Today, I'm really not trying to mail this intro in. And in fact, sometimes I think that these like slightly unhinged intros are actually important to show because it shows that I'm not trying to be like fucking polished and perfect, which, hey, actually plays into today's episode. And, I'm going through stuff on my own too, in addition to producing this podcast. So with that, let's jump straight into talking about today's episode. Today, I have Keshia Rice on the podcast today. And we today are going to talk about these feminine myths and how we can truly step into our true, authentic self to leave these myths such as the good girl or the cool girl behind. How it's important to be authentic when dating and when meeting people so that you don't do what I did in my last relationship, which is to pretend to be the cool girl for literally years. And then the moment that you say, hey, actually, I have needs, your partner goes, fuck you. No, you don't. And leaves. This is a subject very close to my heart. I've actually been speaking with a lot of female friends about it recently. This idea, Keshia starts off talking about the good girl. And then I brought up the subject of the cool girl, which, as we discuss, are kind of two sides of the same coin. And it's this idea that you perform to be what you think a person wants you to be. But at the end of the day, that actually does you a really big disservice. I have more experience with the cool girl myth. I mean, obviously, I've alluded to it a lot. Not even alluded, just straight up said it. But, this idea of the cool girl, I think, came from, I think it originated maybe with like the manic pixie dream girl. but don't quote me on that. And then I started hearing more about it when Gone Girl came out. And side note, I'm not going to spoil anything, but Gone Girl is incredible because it really subverts these expectations, and it takes this idea of the cool girl and completely turns it on its head. So love Gone Girl. Great movie, great book. Honestly, like 10 out of 10 stars, even though I find Ben Affleck's face kind of annoying. Anyway, I thought that before we jump into the episode, we're going to talk like about the good girl and the cool girl, but I've been thinking a lot about this idea of the cool girl lately, and so I pulled some quotes from Gone Girl that I thought were relevant, and I want to share them with you. So it's going to be a little monologue from Gone Girl. Okay. Men always say that as the defining compliment, don't they? She's a cool girl. Being the cool girl means that I am a hot, brilliant, funny woman who adores football, poker, dirty jokes, and burping, who plays video games, drinks cheap beer, loves threesomes and anal sex, and jams hot dogs and hamburgers into her mouth like she's hosting the world's biggest culinary gangbang, while somehow still maintaining a size 2 because cool girls are above all hot. Hot and understanding. Cool girls never get angry. They only smile in a chagrined, loving manner and let their man do whatever they want. Go ahead. Shit on me. I don't mind. I'm the cool girl. Men actually think that this girl exists. Maybe they're fooled because so many women are willing to pretend to be this girl. For a long time, cool girl offended me. I used to see men, friends, coworkers, strangers, giddy over these awful pretender women. And I'd want to sit these men down and calmly say, you're not dating a woman. You're dating a woman who has watched too many movies written by socially awkward men who'd like to believe that this kind of woman exists and that they might kiss them. I'd want to grab the poor guy by his lapels or messenger bag and say, the bitch doesn't really love chili dogs that much. No one loves chili dogs that much. And the cool girls are even more pathetic. They're not even pretending to be the woman they want to be. They're pretending to be the woman a man wants them to be. Oh, and if you're not a cool girl, I beg you to believe that your man doesn't want the cool girl. It may be a slightly different version. Maybe he's a vegetarian, so cool girl loves seitan and is great with dogs. Or maybe he's a hipster artist, so cool girl is a tattooed, bespeckled nerd who loves comics. There are variations to the window dressing, but believe me, he wants cool girl, who is basically the girl who likes every fucking thing that he likes and doesn't even complain. How do you know you're not the cool girl? Because he says things like, I like strong women. And if he says that to you, he will at some point fuck someone else. Because I like strong women is code for I hate strong women. Just gonna let that sink in there for a minute. Side note, I do love chili dogs that much. I didn't when I lived in Michigan, but now that I don't live in Michigan anymore, coney dogs equal life. But that's the thing. That's authentically me. I'm not pretending to be something that I am not. And I wish that I had learned this a long time ago. I think I would have saved myself, quite frankly, years and years of pain and just shoving things into my proverbial closet to make other people more comfortable. Because if there's anything I've realized, it's that if you are your authentic self, it might take some time, but that you will find your people. And you might be rejected a lot along the way, but the people who matter, they will find you because they're looking for you too. So that was a fucking whirlwind of an introduction. And you know what? I'm not even going to apologize for it because it's just where I'm at right now. And hopefully you are here listening to this podcast because you appreciate authenticity and you are not looking for some varnish or perfectly edited podcast, because this is not that. All right. With my little tangent intro being over, I am so happy to have this conversation. I think that it's timely. It's timely with what I've been experiencing and going through recently and understanding. It's timely with what some friends of mine have been having conversations with me about. So let's talk about authenticity and how to be authentically you and buck what other people want and what expectations might be out there, because they don't fucking matter. And I don't want you to waste the time that I did. So, yeah, let's get into it. Keshia is a dating coach. She is a hypnotherapist. She is a preacher's kid. She is someone who is working to make sure that people are living their most authentic lives. And you know what? That's a mission that I can get behind. So without further ado, I'm going to cut to a quick commercial break, and then please enjoy this very enlightening and very important conversation with Keshia Rice.
Broken, a tragic romance game by Apon Games, is a storytelling game of tragic romance for two players about broken objects and broken hearts. Together, you and your play partner will create two characters in a relationship, and over the course of 10 scenes, you will explore the ways in which the things you loved about each other crack, until everything about your relationship is broken, including 10 real-life physical objects you will break over the game's 10 scenes. In Broken, the relationship will always end. Although the tragic conclusion is inevitable, there is endless potential for healing and self-discovery along the way. Broken is an emotionally deep game that explores themes of memory, identity, and loss. Broken is also full of empathy building, hope, and healing. It recreates the raw, visceral experience of going through a breakup, along with the catharsis of smashing objects, all while telling a beautiful story along the way. Get your copy of the Broken ebook edition now by going to bit.ly/brokengame. That's bit.ly/brokengame, or head to apongames.com, APON games.com today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am very excited to be sharing this conversation with my guest today. Today, I have Keshia Rice with me. Keshia, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm doing really well. It's the weather's cooling down where I am, which just makes all the difference, I'm finding.
Yeah. Fall is definitely my favorite season, so I feel you.
Yeah, no, it's so much better. And I'm from Michigan, where there is no fall. It's just like straight like summer to rain for a week, and then it's winter. So I'm like, oh, like it's so much nicer when I live somewhere where there actually is a fall. Okay, let's see. Well, we're going to be talking about a slew of things today. You are a dating coach. You have a background in journalism, TV. So let's get started. Tell me a little bit about you and how you came to be involved in this work.
Yeah. So again, my name is Keshia Rice. I am a dating coach and also a hypnotherapist.
Yes.
I help ambitious women learn how to heal their unhealthy patterns and create great relationships without having to compromise their values, their identity, or their sanity. And honestly, I got into doing this because of a quarter life crisis, which I feel is very millennial of me. Um, so I was in my 20s and I was going through this season where nothing good was happening in my life. So I hated my job. Um, I was in this situationship with this guy that was going nowhere. And, I grew up going to church. So, I was going to this particular church that had a video ministry. And there's this one camera shot they got one Sunday. And it is a friend of mine and myself. She looks perfectly angelic, like the heavens just opened up on her, and I am ugly crying. And at that moment I was like, I can't even God right. So at that point, all of this is happening. All of my friends are announcing their weddings and, babies and all that stuff. I'm planning a friend's wedding shower, and I just start breaking down, crying all over the invitations. And I just said this prayer that was, you know what? I don't know what the hell it is that I want out of life, but this is not it. Just not this, right? And that led me down the whole rabbit hole of reading the self-development books, listening to the podcast. Again, I was a TV news producer, and one of our shows had a life coach on as a guest. And I started talking to him and getting into coaching and everything. And, eventually my life got so much better. I changed jobs. I moved to another city. I started dating the man who became my husband. But as these things were happening, I was like, you know what? I really want to be the woman that I so desperately needed during that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty. I feel like we all kind of have that moment, right? Where it's like, I feel like I'm not lining up with my values, or I feel like I'm not lining up with the person that I want to be. And then you have to like really take a big step back and be like, okay, well, what do I have to do to change it?
Yeah, and it's funny to me because, and maybe this is just because I am a coach. So when I spend a lot of time on social media, I'm seeing, the feeds of other coaches. And there's so much toxic positivity and rah-rah motivation, and you
Totally.
can do it, and you can be great, and you can have the perfect man and have the best career and make $1 million and cure cancer on your lunch breaks. You just need to be a little bit more motivated and a little bit more disciplined. And those things are beautiful, great things, but we don't talk about the truth, the fact that all of this self development, all of this improving our lives starts from a place of pain, starts from a place of things that aren't so pretty.
Yes.
And oftentimes it's not even about being able to accomplish 50 million things and saying that my life is great because I did this. Is I just want to feel better.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And taking those steps to feel better. I read this book called like No Mud, No Lotus, which was incredible. And it's that exact same idea that you really have to, like, a lotus flower is something really beautiful, but it can't be created without the mud. Those moments are the ones that really make us.
Yeah, that's so true.
Well, today I feel like we're going to be getting into a few different topics that you work with your clients in the dating realm. The big thing that we're going to be talking about is boundaries, the myth of being a good girl, why it's important to be selfish in dating, understanding your boundaries, understanding your own needs. So why don't you tell me a little bit about the myth of being a good girl, what that is, and how you work with your clients in that practice?
Yeah, so a lot of my clients are attracted to me because they grew up in very conservative backgrounds
Mm.
where they were supposed to be the quote unquote good girl. Because, my own personal story is I am a PK, a preacher's kid. So, and I ended up, studying religion in college, one of the million things that I've studied in college. And, you know, when you come from that type of background, whether it's Christian or Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, whatever, there are all these expectations on you about having to conform to a certain way, having to behave a certain way. And even people who don't grow up in religious backgrounds, if you're female, then society tells you that you have to keep sweet and keep the peace. Little boys mess with you on the playground and it's, oh, don't get mad. He just likes you. That's why he's
Ugh,
treating you that way. Um,
does not set us
so
up well for the future.
no, it does not. So we have all of these expectations due to our gender or due to our race or due to, the religious background that we come from that teach us that this is what good girls do. This is how good girls behave. And back to what I said before about like self-development on social media, none of it is focused on what actually makes us happy.
Mm,
And it's funny because we talk about things like you can't pour from an empty cup. People understand that analogy, right?
mm-hmm.
People understand the whole idea of, on the airplane, in the event of something terrible happening, you need to put your mask on first before you help
Yes.
others. But we don't live lives that actually follow those principles. We live our lives from a place of let's make everyone else happy first,
Yes.
and then with whatever is left over, we'll try to cobble together some semblance of okayness, not even happiness or joy, but just okayness.
Survival. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
And this is one of those myths about being the good girl. We think that if we do all of these things that society has told us that we have to do, eventually, after everyone else is happy, then maybe, just maybe, we'll be a little bit happy ourselves. Whereas, back to the putting your mask on first and,
Mm-hmm.
having a full cup, it's the exact opposite. It is when you do the things that fill you with joy. It is when you create healthy relationships. Is when you have the right boundaries in place that you become a full person who has enough overflowing to make the world a better place.
Absolutely. It kind of reminds me of, have you seen Gone Girl or read Gone Girl?
I have not, but there are enough people in my life who have spoiled it for me that I know the plot line.
Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil it, but there is a monologue in there, a really interesting one about, it's similar to what you're talking about. It's about being the cool girl. Like there was this idea of this manic pixie dream girl that entered our like consciousness, I guess, like 10, 15 years ago. But the idea that like the cool girl is the girl who doesn't need to have a label on the relationship, and she likes to drink beer and yell at the football game with all of the guys. She doesn't have needs, and she stifles her own needs so that she comes across as cool and not needing anything, which I definitely have experienced. That's why my last relationship ended, was because the moment that I started expressing needs after 4 years, he was like, "Oh, no thanks." he wanted to date the cool girl, right? So it's interesting that there's this good girl myth, but on the other side of it, there's this cool girl myth. What do you think about that?
I think they're two sides of the same coin, because
I
even when you
agree.
think about the cool girl, at the end of the day, it's not that she doesn't have needs, it's that she performs in order to meet everyone else's needs. She yells at the sports and drinks the beer and all of that so that the man doesn't have to go out and get wine, right? or,
Right.
or the man doesn't have to change the channel to something that she might want to watch. She doesn't complain, and she's laid back and low maintenance so that the people in her life don't have to put in forth effort to be in a relationship with her. It's really the same thing. It's just presented and packaged in a different way.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's, at the end of the day, it's putting everybody else's needs above your own. And it's so funny that you use the phrase like you can't pour from an empty cup, because I say that all the time. But keeping your cup full means saying no a lot, actually, which we don't really talk about.
It does. And, you know, whenever I'm working with my clients in my one-on-one program, which, shameless plug, is called Confidently Cherished, which is also the name of my own podcast.
Okay,
But
great. You're
so
here to
when
plug. Hey, plug away.
so when I'm working with women in that program, the hardest thing that they always have to overcome is this whole idea of setting boundaries.
Hmm.
Because the question I always get is, well, Keisha, what if someone gets mad because I say no? What if they don't like me setting this boundary? And in order to get the yes to the things that you do want in life, you have to be very comfortable with saying no to the things that you don't want. You have to get over that idea of, sometimes other people won't like you saying no. Like, it happens to you. People say no to you all the time, and you
Hmm.
survive, you live. Those other people will also live. And it's understanding that in saying yes to what is aligned and saying no to what's not, our yeses are better, our yeses are more beautiful, and our yeses do end up making the people in our lives happier. So it's not even selfish. An example that I can give is when I think of my marriage. There are times when my husband wants to go out and do something and I'm just tired, right? I've
Hmm.
been working all day. I've had, a million different things going on, and I'm just not in the mood for whatever it is that he wants to do. And in that moment, yes, he is a little bit disappointed. But because I am very intentional about all of my relationships and I am intentional about my energy, when he and I do spend time together, that time together is so much better. I'm present. I'm not worried about to-do lists for other things. I'm not thinking about my business in the moment or any family obligations in the moment or anything else in the moment. My time is solely focused on him. He gets a wife who is happier, who is present, who is there to give him all the attention that he wants, who may not be interested in all of the anime that he watches, but will definitely sit there and actually follow the plot line and ask him questions and stuff, because I'm not in the back of my head thinking about the fact that, the day before he also wanted to watch these things. And because I sat with him then, my to-do list piled up, and now, he's wanting to spend time together again. And all I can think about is everything that's not getting done. Right.
Yeah, you can be a fully engaged partner in that moment because you said no.
Right.
Initially. Yeah. That's incredible. And I think, why do you think that people are so afraid of saying no? Do you think it all goes back to that like people pleaser tendency?
Yeah. So, from an evolutionary standpoint, when we're children, it is important that we please our parents because they are responsible for our survival, right? And we understand that concept. And, not saying that some of us had bad parents. Like I always, again, tell my clients that when we're talking about their past, this is not a parent bashing session, but we do have to understand that our parents do the best, our parents or guardian, whoever raised us, they do the best with what they were given, with what they were equipped with. So, you know, they may have treated us in certain ways that made us prone to people pleasing, seeking validation, doing whatever we can to make them happy because that's the way that they were also raised and how their parents were raised and so on and so forth. But then we get into this adult world and we get to a point where under most cases, yes, we can take care of our own needs. We're not dependent on someone else, but that is so ingrained in us to be dependent on others. It is so ingrained in us to seek validation and to feel like the only way we can survive is to make others happy. And yes, in some cases, that's a great recipe for survival, but it's not a great recipe for thriving.
I love that. It's a great recipe for survival, but it's not a great recipe for thriving. I'm gonna have to make a note to write that down. No, that's such a good point. And you're right that we depend on parents, so there is that natural incentive to make our parents happy. Why wouldn't there be, right?
Yeah. And I mean, even as an adult, like I have a pretty good relationship with both my parents. So that's not something that I want to lose. But at the same time, I do understand that my parents and I are distinct people and we have different needs and sometimes those needs aren't compatible.
Yes. And that's
And
okay.
right. Sometimes that means that, they need to get their needs met from somebody else. I have a
Mm-hmm.
brother and sister. So sometimes they can meet those needs in those siblings. Sometimes they can meet those needs in their grandchildren or in other people in their lives. But I cannot be all things to any other person. I can't be all things to my husband. I can't be all things to my parents. I can't be all things to a friend. And it's understanding that where I can make someone's life better and happier and enrich theirs, I want to do those things, but not at the expense of my own happiness.
Absolutely. And I think that there are a lot of, I've been thinking a lot about like social media therapy or pop therapy, pop psychology, the things that you see in the toxic positivity that you mentioned on like, Instagram or TikTok. And I think that in many ways, as much as people are talking about setting boundaries and saying no and, being selfish in dating, making it clear what your needs are, et cetera, there are also ways in which these same
platforms kind of encourage being the good girl or being the nice girl. Like I think about like how-to books like Men Love Bitches or The Rules or what's it, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. These are kind of like manuals for how to, you know, get a person or how to, you know, whatever. But in many ways, do you think that there's a downside and that these books can encourage you to set aside your own needs and prioritize the other person?
Yeah, the main downside is that books like that, if you are a heterosexual woman, these books still at the end of the day center men because they come from the premise of be a challenge because men love challenges, right?
Bingo. Yep.
So, a lot of the advice in those books are sound. It's the perspective that's wrong. So, one thing I love to talk about is I don't think a woman should play hard to get. She should genuinely be hard to get
Right, because
because
she has a busy and full life.
right, because she has prioritized herself. She has done the things that she needs to do to make herself happy. She's focused on her goals and her ambitions. And it's not that she needs a man, but yeah, she desires a partner. She thinks that having a great partner will add to her life. And there's nothing wrong with that. But she also understands that the purpose of this partner is to, again, add to her already loving, happy, fulfilled life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just adding to the vibrancy of the already existing life. I think, man, some of the I had a period after like two breakups ago, I guess, where I like devoured all of those books, The Rules and Men Love Bitches. And I was like, all right, like we're going to dive into this. But you're totally right that instead of taking that viewpoint of, I want to enrich my life to have a good and beautiful life for myself, it was, all right, these are the steps that I have to do to get a partner. So this is what I'm going to do. Which, you know, then of course led to me meeting my last partner who was a avoidant attachment style. And I then learned how to put his needs above my own, how to be that cool girl so that he wouldn't leave. But then, of course, you know, we all have needs. The pandemic hit, and like, what was I supposed to do? Not lean on my partner? But because I had already set the stage for the relationship to revolve around his needs, for him, me asking for my needs to be met came out of left field. And so I think that's a really big danger, and why I really advocate, and I'm wondering your thoughts on this ultimately, why I really advocate for making it clear and asking for needs to be met early on in a relationship. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So as you were talking, two things came to mind. One, yes, you should start making your needs clear from the beginning. Most of the time, when it comes to dating, when we first start dating someone, we don't meet that person, we meet their representative.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we need to do our very best to make sure that when people meet us, they actually meet us and not some version of who we think we're supposed to be. It's not fair to the other person, but it's also not fair to you because if you are interested in having a forever relationship, marriage or otherwise, then you don't want to spend the next, depending on how old you are, you know, 50, 40, 30 years or so pretending to be something else because that person fell in love with something else.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And then it
So,
crashes down around you real hard, let me tell you.
right. So then the other part of that is also back to what I said about not being all things to one person. You shouldn't also expect that of another person for that person to be all things to you.
Mm-hmm.
This is where it becomes important to, cultivate having other relationships and again, desiring a partner and not needing a partner. I can remember when I was in college, the college that I went to, University of South Carolina, go Cox, is in the middle of downtown Columbia, South Carolina. So there's, the city center downtown area surrounding this campus. And I was walking along campus with this guy that I was dating. We kept walking and walking. We ended up at the McDonald's that was nearby, stopped and got lunch there, walked back to campus. No big deal. I mentioned it to my dad. So when I was in college, I was only about 2 hours away from my hometown. So I came home the next weekend, and my dad took me out to a really nice dinner. And he was like, Keisha, are you enjoying this? And I said, yes, it's nice spending time with you. And he was like, but you like the restaurant too as well, right? And I was like, yeah, I really like it. The food is good. And he goes, good. The next time a man tries to take you to McDonald's, tell him no, thank you. I could go someplace much nicer with my father.
Ah, there we go.
So I bring up this story because, when I got really intentional about wanting to be in a healthy relationship, I spent more time with my parents. I spent more time with my friends. I also spent time with myself and enjoying my own company because it made me more discerning. If a guy invited me out for something that didn't seem interesting to me, I would honestly say, no, thank you. I have a better time by myself doing
Yeah.
other things. But also, as I cultivated those relationships with myself and with others, now I love my husband and he does a lot of great things for me. But there are times that my husband is off his A game, right? And
Sure.
on the days that he is not doing as well, I don't feel the need to be clingy towards him or to be like, you must fulfill this. I have other relationships. And it also, he's also aware of that. So it motivates him to be a better husband as well because he recognizes that I don't have to go to him for everything.
I think that is such a good point and so important to point out. Like, I think that's one of the things that I've been doing recently too. I am in a new relationship. I have been for about a year. And I did exactly what you said. I was like, all right, none of this like BS of messing around and trying to pretend that I'm someone who I'm not. And my now partner fell for me hard. And I mean, it was really difficult to learn to be in a more healthy dynamic like that. But what I'm doing now, because what I didn't do last time was I didn't nourish my one-on-one relationships with my friends. I instead was like, oh, like my partner and all of my friends and all of his friends can just hang out together in this big group and, we'll just be one big happy family. It was nice for a while. But then when you start to be too close to people, I mean, familiarity breeds contempt, right? And then you start to not trust different people and you aren't nourishing your individual relationships, then you just feel alone. And so that's what I'm doing now is just to very intentionally, all right, I'm doing this with these friends. I'm doing this with these friends. I'm going to have my one-on-one time with my partner, because like you said, that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody to make them your everything. And it is something that I regret, that I understand why I did it in my past. There was a lot of stress and mental health issues going on, but it is something that I regret, having done in the past. Because at the end of the day, you need to be your priority, right?
Yeah, you need to be your priority. And also, if we are going to talk about creating relationships and attracting someone, there is nothing sexier or more attractive than a person who has their own thing.
Yep.
People want to be able to hear your stories of the things that you're doing, what you have going on. They want to know that, they want to feel special because you've chosen to be with them. You're choosing to spend time with them. They know there are other things you could be doing, other places that you could be. They know that there are other relationships that you could be nurturing, but you care enough about them to spend time nurturing this one.
Absolutely. My partner, like after a hard week, if I'm hanging out with my partner, he'll be like, I know that you're really tired and you could really use introvert time, but I want you to know that I really appreciate that you're choosing to spend your off time with me. I know that you very much would love to be alone and probably, really need that introvert time, but I want you to know that I really appreciate that you're giving me this time. And I'm like, wow, like that's remarkably healthy.
Yeah, I love to travel, and I love solo travel. So earlier this summer, I went to Medellin, Colombia,
Mm.
and I went by myself. And one of the first questions that people kept asking me was, "You're going by yourself? Where's your husband? Why aren't you going with your husband?" My husband already knows. When he and I got engaged, I took 7, 8 solo trips by myself the year we
Oh,
were engaged.
amazing. I love that.
And I took trips like all over the world, not just, a weekend road trip here or there. And I say that because, I come back from these trips, I feel great, I feel refreshed. I've enjoyed my time by myself. It makes me miss him a little bit more. And he appreciates the fact that because he knows me, he knows that I would care nothing about, seriously seeing a TikTok and being like, that place looks cool. Let me hop a flight. So when we have our time out together and we are really intentional about like having a weekend together or something, he's like, I know that you could just hop a plane and go someplace. The fact that you actually want to stay here and spend time with me makes me feel special.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's a beautiful thing. Two people, I think that's been, something that I've had to learn. A relationship shouldn't be something that completes you. It should be two individual people coming together and making a fantastic life together, but they're already whole. That's why I've always hated that phrase, like my other half or my better half. No, you're a whole person on your own. Like there's no halfness here.
Yeah, I get the concept, right?
Sure,
Like
sure.
when we talk about marriage, if you talk about two becoming one, then in theory you would have two halves to make one. Math was not my best subject, but I get that. The problem with that concept is one, we are doing a little bit too much counting and tallying up because in real life, it is never 50-50. All this, that's another thing about relationships, all this discussion nowadays about 50-50 relationships and what's fair. If you live in the modern world, if both of you are working, there are going to be
Mm-hmm.
times where one person makes more money and then the other person makes more money. People lose jobs, people get laid off, people get promoted. So that situation can change. Even if you are in a situation that is traditional where one person makes all the money and the other person, stays at home and they watch the kids and they clean the house, you know, sometimes the person who's doing the career stuff and making the money, there are going to be times where their job is easier than others. And, there are times where they are collecting a paycheck and times where they are working their behind off for every single penny that comes in that paycheck. The person who is at home, there are going to be seasons of child raising that are easier than others. There are going to be times where keeping the house clean is not difficult at all. And then there are going to be times where, it's the holiday season and you're inviting people over. So you're constantly scrubbing this and scrubbing that. So this whole idea of 50-50
Mm-mm.
is
Mm-hmm.
pretty much never the case. Even emotionally, there are times
Yep.
where you are going to be more emotionally sound than your partner is. And you have to be okay with picking up that slack. Just like there are times when your partner's more emotionally sound, and you have to be okay with them holding that space for you and allowing you to do what you need to do to recover and not feeling guilty about that.
Absolutely. I think Brene Brown actually has like a section that she talks about where she talks about 50-50, and maybe her husband will come home from work, they'll both come home from work, and she'll say I got 30% today. And he'll be like, "Okay, well I can make up that 70." Or, he'll come home and he'll say, I've got 80. And she's like, okay, well, I have, 82. So, but it's never actually 50-50. There's going to be some ebbs and flows. There's give and take. And that goes, like you said, emotionally as well as, with like household labor or monetarily.
Yeah. And it's also understanding that if you are constantly trying to tally up who's doing what in a relationship, you will lose.
Yep.
Like mentally, I know that right now, where my husband and I are in our relationship, I can give a okay, in this area I've been doing a little bit more, and maybe I do want to encourage him to, step up a little bit more in this way. Um or I'm lacking in this, and maybe the next time we have a conversation about it, I should bring it up and ask, like, hey, I acknowledge that you're pulling a little bit more weight on this, but I'm in a season where this is difficult for me, or I'm not sure how I can pull a little bit more weight. What can I do to help out? Like, you have those thoughts kind of happening in the back of your head. But I have seen couples be very tit for tat. Before I became a dating coach, my parents used to counsel other couples in their marriages.
Mm-hmm.
And as a teenager, I would sometimes listen in because that was my entertainment. Uh,
It's like your
I
own
have,
little reality TV show, soap opera.
right. I have seen couples be very much like, in the past year, I did the dishes 273 times, and this is how many times you did the dishes. Like, I saw those situations go down, and it doesn't make anybody feel good.
No. No, it doesn't. It's that tit for tat way of living just makes everybody unhappy because no one's going to win. No one feels good about it.
No, and I mean, this is one of the reasons why, when we talk about setting boundaries and everything, this is one of the reasons why boundaries are so important, because you are laying the groundwork for what you need in order for the relationship to work.
Absolutely. And that actually segues beautifully when it comes to, letting go of this myth of being a good girl or being a people pleaser and putting other people's needs above your own, not filling your own cup, etc. All of those. I could go on. Setting boundaries is a really important component to it. There's also, this idea of being selfish. How is setting boundaries and self-love and selfishness, how are they different and how are they similar, and how do we need to piece them apart so that we can understand how to take care of ourselves better? Is it good to be selfish? Is it bad to be selfish? The word has a negative connotation. So
Yeah, people hear selfish and they think psychopath. You know what I mean? That you have no empathy, no sympathy for other people. You just care about what's best for you, and to hell with everybody else, right?
mm-hmm.
And I've definitely seen on social media people reclaim this idea of selfishness, that selfishness is just acting in your best interests, but you can still also keep other people in mind. So use what language feels comfortable to you, right? If whenever you hear the word selfish, all you have is a negative connotation to it, then don't use that. But the idea of putting yourself first, of self prioritizing, if you prefer that,
Mm-hmm.
if that works better for you. But the reason why it's important is because boundaries have to be about centering yourself. So we talked about this earlier, the idea of this good girl myth. The myth is perpetuated because women who follow this myth believe that at the end of the rainbow is reward for themselves. If
Mm-hmm.
they are a good girl, if they do all the right things, eventually they'll get all the things that they want in life. and they'll be happy. And that's just not how life works. If you put yourself first and you set boundaries, boundaries are always about you. They're never about the other person.
Yes. Yep.
So, I'm married, but even in my marriage, I have to understand that at the end of the day, if something happened to my marriage, if my husband up and left, I would be fine because I love myself. Not saying I wouldn't be hurt, not saying I wouldn't need time to recover, but I love myself enough to know that I would be able to pick myself up and still go on and have a beautiful life. And I have cultivated my life to the point where I would still have some healthy relationships in my life. I would still have people loving on me and taking care of me. And part of that is having boundaries set in the relationship and in all of my relationships with family and friends and all as well. And these are the things that I need in place in order to be a good wife, a good friend, a good sister, a good daughter. So when I set boundaries, I am telling the person, hey, in order to have a great relationship with you, this is important to me. So sleep is important to me. Going to bed at a decent time is important to me. In order to have a good relationship with my friends, I need them not to call me past a certain time. And
Yep.
if they can't respect that, then I simply am not going to answer my phone, right?
Sure.
Or if someone is a habitual line stepper, then I will simply not maintain that relationship because they've shown they have no respect for me. Oftentimes, the mistake that people make with boundaries is I'm going to set a boundary to get another person to behave a certain way.
Yes. Oh my gosh,
And,
that the whole Jonah Hill thing that happened recently.
right. And you have to understand, you bring up Jonah Hill, if that were truly a boundary for him, in order for him to be a good boyfriend to someone, he needs his girlfriend to dress a certain way, then okay, find a girl who dresses that way.
Right.
Don't
Don't try to
you
control.
can't, right, you can't force another person to behave differently. And Jonah Hill should know that if that is something that's important to him, he will find a woman who dresses as modestly as as what pleases him, and it will be something that she naturally does out of her own. So he'll be happy and she'll be happy. No problem.
100%. Yep, totally agree. And that's an example that I feel like made a lot of people realize, oh yeah, maybe we're misusing this term boundaries.
Right. And it's, again, like I've heard people say that setting so many boundaries is selfish. And depending on how you feel about that word, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But what boundaries are is understanding. Back to the whole example of friends and bedtime. If I say, don't call me past 9 o'clock at night, if you call me at 7, we have a good, healthy, engaged conversation
Mm-hmm.
because I am awake,
Mm-hmm.
right? I am rested and I'm not staring at the clock thinking about I need to get in bed.
Yeah,
So I'm not
absolutely.
distracted.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not just about me. Like, yes, it is about me. And I am my number one priority, but I'm also making our conversational experience good for you as well.
Yeah, so you can show up and be fully engaged as your best self. I mean, if somebody's calling you for advice at whatever time of night, if I'm tired, I'm not going to give you the best advice.
Right. And it also comes to, as we're recording this, we're getting into the holiday season and everything. And I have so many clients ask me all the time, okay, I'm in a relationship now. You've helped me find a partner, but I'm not ready to introduce them to my family yet. How do I avoid that conversation? Or I'm not in a relationship because I'm really focused on working on myself. So how do I talk to my family and get them to stop asking me for the millionth time? When am I going to get married and give them some babies, right? And I tell them that that is a boundary that you can set in conversations. You can say, hey, we're not talking about dating and relationships. And if people don't want to respect that, at first you can say, ha ha, laugh it off, change the subject, make it clear that you're not engaging in this. But you can also tell them, hey, I've been clear. This is not something that I want to share with you right now or talk to you about. We can talk about anything else. We can talk about money. We can talk about religion. We can talk about politics. We can talk about reality TV shows, whatever you want to talk about, just not this thing. And if you can't respect that, then we don't really need to be having conversations right now. And again, it's not about making them behave a certain way, because it is about you and your behavior. You follow through. They respect you, so they're going to respect that boundary, or they don't respect you, so you're just not going to show up for Thanksgiving dinner. You're going to find other plans.
Yeah,
You're not going to have these conversations with them on the phone. But it's more about
absolutely.
your behavior than it is about their behavior.
Yes, this is a boundary I'm setting. You can do whatever you want, but I'm just saying that if this happens, this is how I will react. Not in a way to control you, which I think can confuse a lot of people there, but it's just, I will remove myself from this situation. If somebody consistently is going to call me after 10 p.m., I'm going to put my phone on silent so that I don't have to worry about it. You can still call me after 10 p.m., but I'm not going to pick up. That's my boundary.
Right. And it's understanding when you set boundaries, knowing going into that boundary, what is in it for me? So the phone call conversation, I don't take phone calls after a certain time because I need to rest. You know, other people in my life might be able to do very well on 4 hours of sleep a night. And that is great for them, fantastic for them. But it's not how I roll, it's not how I operate.
Yeah, me neither.
So I'm not restricting their ability to stay up all night and talk on the phone, because there are probably other people in their lives who can also work on little sleep and they can talk to those people. I'm just saying, for me, I can't. So I'm going to remove myself from that situation. The example I gave with conversations, I had friends who used to love, actually, they probably still do, but reading and looking at all those like gossip websites and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I participated in that for the longest time, but then I had to stop because, for the sake of my mental health, first of all, it wasn't doing me any good to be so caught up in other people's business, but also just things like, when you own a business and you own an online business and you are your own brand and you're the face of your brand, you start seeing people trash talk other people online, and it starts to get in your head like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
goodness, every time I post, do people talk about me like this? Right?
Totally.
So I had to stop engaging in that. And I had friends who at first were a little bit resistant. They're like, oh, come on, girl. Like, you find this story funny, or you want to talk about this too and all. And I had to be like, no, there are other people that you can talk to about this. At the very least, you can just go on social media. These sites have Instagram pages or whatever. You can comment and start a whole discussion in the comment section if you
Make
like.
new friends.
Right. But for me, I'm not judging you for liking these gossip sites. Like, I used to like them myself. So, of course, I'm not judging you. Go with God. It's not bothering you, but it is bothering me. So, I need to stop.
Yeah, so I stopped watching like The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. I was just like, this is not good for my mental health. Some friends kept watching it, but I just, removed myself from that situation. So that's a good example.
Right. And you don't think your friends are evil for watching The Bachelor. It
No,
just doesn't work for
no.
you.
Yeah, no, 100%. And when it comes to like boundaries and dating, what are some red flags that you have the women that you work with look out for to make sure that their boundaries will be respected? What are, I mean, just red flags in general for dating, but also and specifically red flags to make sure that these people will be respected.
So, first, you want to make sure that this person has boundaries themselves.
Great answer.
So, that is a huge red flag to me when someone has no boundaries around time or consideration or anything. When I was dating, I worked an overnight shift. So I was very cognizant when it came to time because of my own time. And I would ask the men I was dating, like, oh, is there any time of day or any day of the week that you're really busy so I can keep that in mind? And it was a red flag to me when a guy said, oh, no, whatever, I'm free whenever. It doesn't matter. Because one, like, do you work?
Yeah,
but
good point.
but two, I don't want you to drop every single thing to answer phone calls and text messages from me because
Right?
eventually you will grow to resent me.
Yep, 100%.
So, one, you want to make sure that somebody has boundaries of their own. But the other thing is, I said it before, someone who is a habitual line stepper. So that whole thing with like not calling me past a certain time. When I was dating, I had men who tried it, right? They would, and it would be little things like, oh, please don't call me after 8 p.m. And a guy would call me at 8:05. Okay, honest mistake. Time got a little away from him. Still wanted to say goodnight. Cool. And then he'd do it again and again and again. And it's like, this is
Mm,
someone who's testing you to see what
mm-hmm.
they can get away with. Or they're sending a bunch of text messages saying, like, I didn't want to call you because I figured you might be in bed, but I thought I'd text you just in case, just to see if maybe you're still up. Like they're still testing this boundary and seeing what they can push.
Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely something to look out for. Having their own boundaries. I don't know why I didn't even think about that, but that's such a good indicator that they would respect your own.
Right. Or when you see that someone is very enmeshed in other people. So the one most people think of is the stereotypical mama's boy.
Right.
Can't make any decisions because everything has to go through his mother, and she's a very overbearing person and all that. And yes, I've seen those relationships, but I've seen men be like that with their best friends,
Yep.
or they have these enmeshed relationships with their jobs, where if, especially since the pandemic, where if their phone blows up with text messages at 11 at night and it's something that they handled at the office earlier that day, they still feel the need to start getting online and checking and making sure that everything is okay. And you want a person who is balanced. You want a person who has a healthy career, who has as healthy of a relationship as they can have with their family. And I say that because there are toxic families out there.
Yep.
um, but who at least has healthy relationships with their chosen family, friends, and people that they allow into their lives. You want someone who is intentional about having time for themselves and intentional about making time for relationships. Back to what we said earlier about not necessarily needing a partner, but desiring one. If you desire a partner, you are intentional about your time spent looking for said partner and your time spent when you're in a relationship. So if you have someone who doesn't have that type of intentionality, who will make a date for you and date with you, and then their friend calls and like, oh, it's whatever, like, let's just have 50 million friends over too. So then like neither of those relationships are getting nourished. They're not having the quality time with their friends or their quality time with you because they're trying to combine that together. Like that's a problem.
Yep. Yep. 100%. You're speaking to my past. I'm like, oh, that there's so many red flags that I'm like, ooh, I saw that. I noticed it. I didn't do anything. But I can absolutely vouch and back that statement up. It's dicey and it's hard to see sometimes, but don't ignore your red flag. If you feel something might be a little bit off, then you're probably right.
It is so funny how talk about we talked earlier about like societal programming and all that, but the ways in which we train ourselves to not even trust ourselves. So constantly crowdsourcing opinions on social media or
Mm.
crowdsourcing opinions from family members, but even things like when I really got intentional about honing my discernment and my intuition, I learned that I really needed to listen to my body and do a much better job of listening to my body. And it came down to even the little things like not holding it in when I have to pee. Like my body says I need to go, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And I say that because we get in all of these habits slowly but surely of ignoring ourselves. And then we wonder why we end up in messed up situations. Well, you got in this habit of ignoring yourself, and then your body's telling you more important things, not, you need to pee, and you're like, okay, I can put that off for 10 or 15 minutes, or you need to go to sleep. Okay, well, I'll spend 30 minutes on TikTok and then I'll go to sleep. You start ignoring the bigger things, and then you get
Right.
out of a relationship and you're like, oh, yeah. I heard the alarm bells go off in my head, but for some reason, I ignored all those things.
Yep. Yep. It's funny how that works. But I mean, at the end of the day, it gives you better insight as to how you want to conduct dating and how to listen to yourself in the future. It's all a learning lesson, right?
Oh, yeah. I never want anyone to feel guilty about their past. Maya Angelou said it, when you know better, you do better. So, first of
Yep.
all, it's understanding that sometimes we just don't know, especially the ways in which we've grown up. Maybe we watched our mothers constantly put other people's needs above her own. So we fall into the same pattern because that's what was modeled for us. We don't know any better. But then when you get into the adult world, even if you start having these feelings in your mind of something just not being right, that's what happened with my whole quarter life crisis. I said, I don't know what it is that I want out of life, but this is not it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just started reading books and listening to podcasts and all, and being like, oh, okay. I don't agree with what that person said, so that doesn't work for me. But, oh, okay, this idea is interesting. Maybe I'd like to
Yeah.
explore this a little bit more. I want to hear more about this. This sounds really right. This is kind of foreign to me. I've never done this. Like I've never set a boundary, but it sounds like a good thing. Maybe I should try it. It's in building up that willingness to try things out, to try on new ideas, and then sometimes getting that guidance in the form of a coach or a therapist to help guide you through that process, but learning how to listen to yourself and give yourself the audience that it needs.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's self-exploration and learning, and take what works for you and leave the rest, all of that stuff. It only helps to do that exploration.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to what you said about that exploration, one of the other important things is literally exploring. So I've talked about solo travel, and I will always think that that is the best way to do things, because I've just learned so much about myself. But if you don't have the time, if you don't have the budget, if you're just not insane like me and willing to just go to a foreign city where you know no one and don't know the language and pray for the best, um, even being intentional about spending that time by yourself, you know, learning what is it like to be by myself, to enjoy my own company. And maybe you drive to the next town and go to the farmer's market, right?
Yeah.
Try a different restaurant that you haven't tried before. Maybe you sit with yourself and just think, because of various circumstances in my childhood, I didn't necessarily have the childhood I wanted. What would 5-year-old me enjoy doing right now? Okay,
Yes.
5
Yes.
year old me would like to have ice cream for lunch. Let's go do it and see what happens. It is having a natural curiosity when you talk to people. It's funny. I was telling a story to my husband the other day, and we've been married for 4 years, dated for 3 years before that. So I was telling him some random story. And he was like, "You know what? I didn't know that about you." I was like, "What do you mean?" Because you feel like after you've been with someone for a while, like
Right.
you just know each other. And he was like, "Yeah, for some reason, I guess that just never came up." And it got me really curious. So then I started asking him a bunch of questions about different things. And he was like, "Why are you asking me so many questions?" I was like, "I'm just curious. Like, I feel like if you're discovering new things about me, then there are things that I haven't discovered about you. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just really curious. I want to explore those things. And so we did learn some new things about each other, but I think about that even in the dating process. When you're meeting someone, asking questions from a place of curiosity, not from a job interview perspective. You're
Yes,
interviewing for your next boyfriend or your next husband, but because you think it's just fascinating to get to know another person, right?
absolutely. Yeah, it shouldn't be high stress. It can be just meeting new people and then seeing what happens from there.
It should be fun. The
Mm-hmm.
process should be fun, but not only that, it should be understanding that as you are exploring new people, new things, new places, new ideas. So, reading books or listening to podcasts that you typically wouldn't read or listen to, all of that, that not only are you becoming a more interesting person, which makes you more attractive, not only in asking these questions from a place of curiosity to a potential date, you're making yourself more interesting to that date. You're also making them more relaxed so that you can learn the things that you actually need to learn as far as discernment
Yes,
goes. But you are also becoming a better person for yourself. Like you're becoming a more full version of yourself.
absolutely.
It's- I think about little kids and little kids refusing to eat certain things, right? And the parent being like, well, how do you know if you're going to like, if you, that you don't like that because you've never tried it? So many things in our life are like that. We've never tried it. We've never asked that type of question. We've never been bold enough to set the boundary and see what happens. We have never just taken these steps. So we don't know if we like these things. We don't understand how freeing boundaries are until we actually set them.
It's a very, very good point. Well, Keisha, we're running low on time here, but give me some information about you. You're also, we didn't even talk about it, but you're a hypnotherapist. And I know that you've done some various writings. You have a lot of different social media accounts. You have a podcast. So go ahead and talk about all the things.
Yeah. So hypnotherapy is something that I really love because in my coaching, I specialize in helping women uncover the healthy patterns that led to them being in relationships that are unaligned so that we can, fix those and create new healthy patterns. And hypnotherapy does so much with being able to uncover what got you into the place that you are and also in changing that mindset. But the easiest way to find me is again, my podcast is called Confidently Cherished. So anywhere you get podcasts, you can listen to that. And also, if you can spell my name, Keshia, Keshia, Rice, Rice, then I am on Instagram, on TikTok, on Pinterest, and on YouTube at Keshia Rice.
Awesome. And YouTube. You're all over the place. Well, Keshia, thank you so much for sharing all this information, for just a really great in-depth look about boundaries and kind of trying to subvert that good girl myth that and the cool girl myth that so many of us are sold. You're doing some incredible work, and I really appreciate you coming on to share everything that you have to teach.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. And thank you, everybody, for listening. You've been listening to Wine, Dine, and 69. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, and let's keep talking.